All right, let's give it up for Trey. So who would like to ride Trey's bike? Anybody?
It's on.
All right, sweet. Trey, welcome. So glad you could be with us tonight. So first of all, the video you ride big bikes, but that's obviously not a very big bike. So what's up with the tiny bike?
I don't know, man. I put it in my truck on the way down here, and I guess I drove in the rain, and something happened to it.
Okay.
Just shrunk.
Okay. Easier or harder to ride a little bike?
A little cramped, for sure. My knees were touching the handlebars, but it's a blast either way.
Huh.
So 2 wheels is good.
Well, Trey, there's 1,000 things we could talk to you about. But first of all, just tell us, the average team out there doesn't exactly know what you do. So tell us about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah, so a little bit of that that you saw in the video, but just exaggerated. It's always crazy when you're there, and we're jumping 70, 80 feet in the air, and we go all over the country, sometimes all over the world, and we race down the road at AT&T Stadium. We do events like that.
You've raced inside the Cowboy Stadium?
Yeah. They'll actually be there later this year.
That's actually better than the actual team that plays there. I mean, it's a bad year. I like the Cowboys. Just 8-8? Man, come on. Anyway, back to you, Trey. So, all right, so professional motocross, or motocross. And let's clarify that. It's not motor with an R, it's moto.
Yeah, don't say motocross.
Motocross is wrong.
Bad. Yeah, motocross. Yeah.
There you go. You learned something. You can tell your parents that. So tell us about the culture of motocross.
Yeah. So for me, it was really exciting. As a kid growing up, it's what I wanted to do. So if you play basketball or whatever your sport is, just think about the NBA or the NFL or whatever that is, and that was motocross for me. And so getting to be a part of that was so exciting, and I loved the racing, I loved the bikes, and all of that. But there was kind of a flip side to it, because I looked up to a lot of the guys I watched growing up, and then I met a lot of them, and they weren't really exactly what I expected. And I think a part of that was it's a competitive environment, and that breeds a lot of insecurity. And when people get insecure, they start to do things that you don't expect them to do. And so it was a really cutthroat environment. It was about me being the man or the best guy. It was about who had the best bike, the best team, the best body, the best girlfriend, the best party. So it was a really kind of dark place at times, and I think it was really eye-opening for me, especially coming in, because I didn't really expect all that, and what I saw was pretty dark at times.
So super selfish culture then, just all about me, all about winning, not at all the others-focused value system that we find in Scripture.
Yeah, there's a saying, you're only as good as your last race, and people really literally live by that, and whatever it takes to beat the next guy, or to whatever that is, they'll do it, and it was pretty difficult being in that sometimes. But
so we've been talking all weekend about Babylon and what that looks like in the Old Testament. How else was motocross culture not necessarily that moral?
Yeah, I would say that there was good people, but there was hardly any godly people, and so you could be friends with a lot of these people, but I didn't really want to associate with a lot of them, because what was happening is, being that it's a competitive environment all around, it's a very, I would say, sexualized environment. There's what's called the monster girls, and they're basically paid trophy girls, that don't wear very many clothes, and that kind of is through the entire culture. And whether you're a wife or a girlfriend or a racer or a mechanic, it's just this really cutthroat competitive environment, which I being a competitive person liked at times, but the dark side of it was also very difficult.
And I assume there's also a pretty big emphasis on just party culture.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's I would say an after party every single weekend, and then in the off season, it's who's throwing the party or who's doing the thing, and so that's a huge part of the culture, and I mean, even in any other sporting event, you know, you go there and people are drinking. That's just the culture, and I would say as an athlete and a part of that, it's a massive part of the culture.
So now this is so important for teens to hear this. You're in this sport. You're not just in it, but you're really good at it. Like you're just winning all these races. You can pretty much do anything you want, have any girl you want, go to any party you want. It's all right there, and you're getting invited to these things all the time. But you told me you did resist. How did you do that?
I think I want to answer that in a few ways, because I think the first thing I want to say is I wasn't perfect. And I think that's important for, you know, everyone in this audience to think about, because, you know, I looked at my heroes growing up and I just thought these guys were perfect, you know, they did everything right. And when I met them, I realized they weren't. And so the reason I say that is because I would say that if there's a struggle that you're going through, I would imagine either your youth minister, someone in your family, and your best friend is probably going through a similar struggle. So I guess I would say that the first thing is that I wasn't perfect, but I was able to say no to a lot of things. And I think the first thing I was really able to do that, the reason I was able to do that was because this kind of foundation my parents gave me. You know, we'd be at these races and they would be on weekends, Sundays. Obviously, we couldn't make it to worship. And so, you know, we'd be out, we'd be doing our thing, and my parents would be like, okay, come on, we're going to have a Devo. And I'm like, shh, come on, don't sing that too loud, you know? As a kid, I was like, man, this isn't what my friends are doing. And so I was almost embarrassed by it. But the thing that I loved about that is it built up in me this courage to be different and to stand up for Jesus. And so in the beginning, I think my first year as a pro is like one of the guys came to me and was like, hey, we're throwing a party, you want to go? And my immediate response was like, no, I don't do that. And maybe I made that decision because of what my parents instilled in me. And
so even though you didn't like what your parents did in the moment, you're saying that later on that built in you this deep reservoir to draw from to say, so that you could say, no, I don't want to go.
Absolutely. You know, and I think over time that became a personal decision, right? So maybe in the beginning it was just, you know, I don't want to do this because maybe that's what my youth minister said or what my mom or my dad said. But it became personal, you know, and so years later, as this continues to build, it becomes my decision, and I start to understand that what Jesus has done for me makes me want to honor him. And so when I say no to these things, it's my decision, and it's about honoring Jesus. It's about standing out for him.
Man, that's huge. So be humble enough to admit you're not perfect. Realize that your parents aren't the enemy there, and then just be courageous to say no in the moment.
Yeah, and I think as you build on those decisions, they get easier, right? So in the beginning, it was like, hey, Trey, you want to go to this party or do that thing? And I was just like, no. And then all of a sudden, I quit getting those questions. And I don't think it was a bad thing because people started to respect me.
Yeah, you had a reputation now.
Yeah.
So tell me, so these teens come Monday, they're going to be right back in the worlds that they left, and a lot of them are going to have a lot of temptation. What would be your one, if you had one piece, anything left, one piece of advice, kind of any last thoughts for them, what would you want to say?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me, and it's something that was difficult for me when I first came into the sport, Supercross, was I felt really alone. You know, there was only one or two guys that even claimed to know Jesus. And so it was very isolating, and I didn't really feel like I had someone there. Years later, it was changing, though. Like, the culture started to change, and I had people that I trusted and believed in. And so I guess the first thing I would say to anyone is know that you have a community around you that you can reach out to. Because, you know, it was very difficult for me in those times not to have those people. And as I've gotten older and as the culture changed, I had those people. And not only was I saying no and you know, having to wrestle through that, I all of a sudden had this group to where I fit in, I associated, and we could all be striving towards the same goal, and you know, try to do our best in changing the world that we love, racing, so that we know Jesus.
Wow, that's really well said. Hey, let's give Trey another round of applause. And I will say one thing, Trey's super humble. I don't know if you can say this, but he just told me this earlier today. So he's actually retired from the riding part, but he's still in the sport, helping out, testing bikes. He travels all over the country doing stuff for the sport. And he did say that in the last few years, what he's noticed, there actually is quite a bit more spiritual things happening in the sport. People have devos. There's been some things in the past that he had said happened, especially with girls, that aren't happening anymore. And I asked him why he thought that was, and he said, I'm not saying it was everything, but especially a few years ago, a lot of these younger guys looked up to me, and I do think that God has used my very, very small acts of resistance to start something bigger in the sport. Isn't that amazing? I mean, let's give a round of applause for God. And Trey is going to be somewhere. I know a lot of you are going to wait.